Wero2017 inspired Māori leadership in education.
Yeah, I think I drew the short straw at coming second, actually, because, but in another way I drew the long straw because so much of what the speaker said before, I'm going to say again, and I'm going to build on that. So if I start off, oh, come on, you've got to work. Okay. If I start off and I say that, I'm saying me taki mā te mama. That is my mum. She is the now eldest of our whānau in the Aparo Dean family from Aitutaki and Manahiki. And this is at her 90th birthday, and she's now 90, which is extraordinary for somebody born on a remote island like Rakanga, that's where she was born, to be 90 and to be 91. But the thing about her is that also the closest, my mother speaks 4 dialects from the different islands that she comes from, but the closest dialect she speaks is Ngāti Porou. She actually understands, converses completely, so the transfer from Manahiki to Ngāti Porou is very close. So I'm your whānau too, I think. But I also have this up here because I'm not standing in front of you representing me. Everything I say as part of who I am, as part of my family. And that's really important because I do go into schools and I am ultra challenging and lots of teachers are really scared of me. And when I come into the schools, the people say, is Bobby here? Because they know that I'm going to be challenging them. But I'm only challenging them for the children. And that's the bottom line. So when we start to look at the area that we work in mostly is Auckland. I come from Auckland, born in the King Country. Auckland has the largest Pacific population, and I think that 70% of New Zealand Pacific peoples live in Auckland, right? 14% of Auckland's population is of Pacific descent, but often they all get lumped together. And that's one of the things that we as a whole group of people say, no, we're not all the same. And in fact, there's a very famous quote where somebody said, it wasn't until I got off the aeroplane that I knew that I was a Pacific Islander. Before that, I was Samoan, right? So that's the message I'm saying here, is that there is no one size fits all at all. And now there are multi-layers of one size, multiple sizes. And we've got to keep thinking about that when we deal with these children. However, the ministry do dump them all together, and they do, say these are the results for this group of people. And I think that we need to pay attention to this data, 2013. Percentage of Māori students achieving a curriculum standards at Year 8 in mathematics, 26%. So that was national standards data. Percentage of Pacifica students achieving curriculum standards at Year 8, this is mathematics, 11%. Okay? So when you start to look at data like that, and you start to say what's going on, right? And you start to say, well, what do the teachers think about this? Well, what was the teachers' perceptions about their ability to meet these students' needs? Because they filled in the response forms as well. Most of them thought they were doing a really good job. Now that, I think, stops you in your tracks. When you start to think, if teachers think they're doing a really good job, and we've got 75% of those children failing, because if you aren't at curriculum standard 4, at the curriculum level 4, at the end of year 8, you cannot do high school maths. You're finished. You're out of it. This year I was in the States and I listened to a professor called Professor William Tate. Makes really interesting if you ever want to go and look up his work. And what he did was he gave a keynote talk where he showed what years students disengaged from mathematics against their life expectancy. And if students disengaged from mathematics at age 10, they died 15 years earlier. And he had masses of data. So there's a challenge. I'm sitting in front of you saying, actually all of us, we are not happy with what we're doing for these children. And that's why, because we are actually changing their life expectancy. He gave this talk to 7,000 teachers, and he threw it at the teachers and said, this is your responsibility. You've got to do something about it. And I since went and had a look for other things that he'd written. So why? Well, I'm going to talk about deficit theorising, right? Deficit theorising goes on and on and on. More recently, I've talked a lot about white privilege. I've talked about the fact that people do not realise how privileged they are just because they speak English, just because they've got white skin, right? I have this funny thing because I've got this white skin, and I have all my life listened to how people speak to my mother. And I've always wondered, why do you speak louder to her? Do you think she's deaf? Why do you slow down what you're saying to her? She's my mother. She's clever, right? Why do they slow it down? Because she still speaks broken English, but she speaks 5 languages. But that doesn't count. I've also been in the Cook Islands where my mum gets spoken to so differently because she's known and therefore respected, right? So the privilege goes the other way, and we always go to a lot of family things, and when we're not known, people talk in Cook Island Māori about the papa'as over there until my mother tells them off, right? But this is the type of thing that we consistently hear over time. You don't understand. These children come to school knowing nothing. And that, if you listen in staff rooms, you hear it all the time. Which children? Oh, the ones that are different from you. Those are the ones who know nothing. Okay? But, in fact, it's always attributed to the learner. Now, that deficit theorising works for children as well. So the children, because they see no connection between what they do in maths at home, what they do in maths in their local environment, because I always talk about you've got to look at the maths they're using in their everyday life. Many, many teachers interpret that as, oh, it's the maths around school. Well, no, actually, for lots of children, school is also a random place. Our kids talk about it being random. I'm talking about our Pacific kids, right? It's got to be, they're at the skate park. There's a heap of maths involved in that. But also, if you go and look at, like I think of Mangere, if I go into the shops in Mangere, I'm not going to buy a cream donut, I'm going to buy panakiki or panapopo. That's what I'm going to. So therefore, you're going to write your problems around that, and your maths is going to be embedded in that. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. So here's a really good mathematician who said, and this is a common comment, sometimes it makes me feel different because Tokalauans don't do maths. That's because at school, it's not visible. Right? And this one just threads through. Now, last year we worked down in Christchurch with Ngāi Tahu, And we got exactly the same comments from some of the Ngāi Tahu kids as we got from the Samoan boy. So I've heard it from different areas here. So this boy is saying, it feels like I'm a different person from a Samoan person, because whenever I'm learning maths, I think I'm Palangi, white. Because whenever I'm doing maths, I can't remember I'm Samoan. I don't like it about maths when I get up to the hard part. I can't do it. I don't feel like a white person anymore. I feel like myself again, and I'm nervous. Now that's children identifying who teachers think can do maths and who can't. And that's them being shaped towards thinking maths is for somebody else and not me. Now, maths is what is going to give us a future. So if we allow children to have that, that's a challenge. So the next thing that I'm going to sort of challenge is the negative effect of ability grouping. And in our work now, we've come to a space where we say there is no such thing as ability. There is no such thing as ability. And if you ability group your children, you are actually only doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for the children. It serves you, it doesn't serve the children. Because when you ability group, you are really basically, like I could do this, I could halve this room in half and say, okay, you're in the bottom group and you're in the top group. You guys over there, you can go and learn to do some great thing. You've got to keep doing your tables. Yeah, and that's what happens to children, right? But also too, who falls into these groups? And for our Pacifica students and their values and their beliefs of respect and politeness, and when you talk and when you don't talk, and why you talk and why you don't talk, then it makes it's easy to work out why our Pacifica students endlessly end up in the fourth group, the lowest group, right? Because they're not going to challenge others, they're not going to, because it's not even considered polite. So there's a whole lot of things that go through them. There's a whole lot about listening and respecting, that you actually learn through listening. And then this whole thing about competitiveness and individualisation, and it makes me worry when I hear individualised learning plans for people, when actually I come, and you come, from a group of people who believe in communalism. We believe that when we work together, the product that we produce is all of ours. And that's how a maths classroom can be as well. And then the cultural capital valued in the classroom. So if you are struggling with the context of maths and the mathematics, then you're not going to succeed. I've been in classrooms where the teachers have given the children a problem about Mr. Brown, usually Farmer Brown and his eggs, chickens or whatever, and you watch a group of kids who've just come from somewhere in the Pacific. And I listened to this group of kids talking about this problem, and Farmer Brown's chickens laid so many eggs a day. How many do they lay over a week and over a month? And these kids had a long conversation about, well, how did they know even where they laid the eggs? Because if you're in the Pacific, they lay them everywhere. They crow all night, they crow all day, and they're wild. So why would those kids ever even be able to solve that problem? They couldn't get past the context. So, make it real. So what's our goal? Our goal, and it has been a consistent goal, is to challenge the status quo about how maths is taught and learnt in New Zealand classrooms for our learners, right? That's what our goal is, okay? And you can see from there that always we tend to work as groups and we work as one. And so I'm actually tired, and this is my challenge again to you. I'm tired of all the interventions that have happened that are going to fix the problem. I'm saying that we need to reinvent what we do, and that's what we've been trying to do, is reinvent and go from the bottom up and actually find a solution that doesn't say it's about our children, that says it's about what you do. So one of my common things in listening about national standards, just recently I took a staff meeting in a school where I said, if you put a child below the national standards, so if you put a child below the national standards, you have to say what opportunities did you give that child to learn, otherwise you can't say that child's below the national standards. So you've got to be saying, what is it that you did that allowed that child to learn? And what opportunities were they able to pick up and what couldn't they pick up? And therefore, that's why you say they're below. Otherwise, they should be at the national standards. Because what I'm saying is, here, in our reinvention, it's about giving them opportunities to learn. It's about us as teachers saying, what is it about what I'm doing with children that is actually making it possible for them to learn or not possible to learn? And what that does is it deflects away from, oh, there are all these hungry children. Oh, they don't come to school with this. Oh, it's all about the child. Oh, it's not about that. It's actually about us as teachers and what we do that allow them to learn. So it's our interactions. So this is ambitious, that's number one. It is really ambitious. This is something that takes teachers about 3 years. I'm not talking about something that happens overnight. I'm talking about learning a pedagogy that takes 3 years, slowly but surely. And in the first year, we are very clear when we're working in schools. We say, it's actually about you. It's about you changing your values and beliefs. It's about you opening your eyes. It's about you learning the pedagogy. And yes, the children are going to love it. But you're not going to be the expert, and yeah, maybe you won't see achievement change. Actually, often the achievement goes whoosh like that because suddenly children are allowed to do things at a much higher level. So it's ambitious. It's got to be culturally responsive. Otherwise, why bother, right? It's having teachers have pedagogical and content knowledge, right? And I believe that I don't take a deficit view on children, I don't take a deficit view on teachers. So teachers also, we have a big problem in New Zealand with teachers who are maths phobic, who really don't like teaching maths. That's not their fault, that's how they were taught. It just keeps coming back. But I've seen teachers just completely turn around when they're involved in doing this. It's ethics of care. Now, the ethics of care is a really strange one because in the ethics of care, what you're actually saying is, I care enough to make you step up to the plate, right? So there has been some culturally responsive type stuff that has gone against some of our learners in the maths classroom. It's not good enough to say, well, Pacifica children, they don't like to challenge or ask questions. Because in a maths classroom, that's how you become a good maths learner. So you have to learn it, but you do it in a cultural way. There are ways of doing it. There are also things like, there are lots of Pacifica children who are really gifted, and I mean gifted, at waiting out teachers. They will just wait and Māori. They are brilliant at it. Well, teachers have to learn to outweight them, and if they cry, so what? Ethics of care, I care enough to make you step up to the plate, but in a way that's supportive. And you heard my thing about mixed ability. Got to be mixed ability. We've taken the word abilities out, we say it's social. If you work together, you can all learn from each other. The next one is that high expectation. Lots and lots of people. It takes about 6 months to get teachers to give children maths that's too hard for them. In fact, if we wanted to change our data in New Zealand, if every teacher was told to actually step up 2 notches with the problem they gave their children, our data would go up, right? So we kind of say now, when we go into schools, where the data's way down here, I'm working in an intermediate school in Rotorua, and we just said, we only want to see level 3 and level 4 problems. Oh, but our children are level 3 and level 4 problems. That's it. Don't want to see anything below. Funny enough, I was in a classroom and I was working alongside the teacher, and the children, and this is a really, this school is not an easy school. It's a really hard school, and a lot of things happen, and it bursts, it's fiery, and things burst in a classroom really rapidly. And I felt very sorry for this teacher, because I was there as well, and she'd given them this really hard problem, and the children were really, and they were starting to go, oh, this is dumb, I can't do it. There was sort of this rumble. So I said, do you mind if I just talk to them? And she went, yes, you talk to them, rescue me. And that was good. So I just said to these kids, I said, look, I just want to say something to you. Your teacher has given you a really hard problem. That's because she thinks you're clever. She thinks you've got a brain. If she could give you an easy problem, and she has in the past, and really what she was saying is, I think you're dumb. I think you're all dumb, so you can do it, and you'll get it finished, and you won't learn anything, and you won't feel good about it. But now she's given you a problem that says, I trust you, I think you're clever, I think you're bright, I think you can work together, and you will show, and at the end of this, you're going to feel really good. Within about 5 minutes, those kids had got it. It was a level 4 problem. And by the end of that hour, I heard more maths thinking coming out of those children than I had heard in some high decile schools, right? That's called giving them opportunities to learn, no? That's what we're talking about. And that's what I'm talking about, having challenge. And that's challenging for us as teachers to give those children really hard problems and watch them struggle, right? But if you tell them, you say, this is a really hard problem, you're going to really struggle, actually, at the end of it, having struggled, you're going to feel really good about it. You've told them, you've let them in. We also build on the core Pacifica values. With Ngāi Tahu, we worked with Māori values. The values really do cross over. They are different, but they're the same. There is a lot of values because it's all about the collectivism, the reciprocity, things like that work very strongly. And the other one that we deal with is language, because language, in lots of our children, English is not their first language, and you can get a much richer discussion when you're allowed to talk in your own language. But for teachers, they often don't allow that to happen because they say, I don't know what they're saying. Well, they do. The kids do, and they're going to explain it back, and they're recording. Trust the kids. That's the kind of thing we say. And once teachers do that, children start to see that they can actually learn mathematics, and that mathematics happens for them in different languages and things. Okay? I'm going to just keep going. So I was talking about equity. And if we actually look at the cultural perspective, because I've just talked about Pacifica, but I can also talk about the children down in this Ngāi Tahu school had 20 different ethnic groups sitting in there, as well as the Ngāi Tahu children. And so I came in one day, and this is an example of culturally responsive pedagogy, because we get things, people say, oh, but you're only privileging one group. Well, no, we're not privileging one group. And this, I'll just tell you a little story. I came in this room, and this teacher had a problem, and it was with 6 or 7-year-olds. She had this problem about dates, about sharing dates, the little brown dates. I thought, why would you have a problem sharing dates? I mean, yuck, I hate dates. And so I just let it go because, I thought, well, this will be interesting. So when she launched this problem, and it was about somebody had bought this box of dates and they were going to share it out. This little boy sat, when she said, who knows what's happening in this story, this little boy sat right up and he said, I do, he said. We love dates. He was a little Indian boy. It was the end of Ramadan. And he said, at the end of Ramadan, it's the first food that we eat to break the fast. He said, dates are more important to us than the best chocolates or candies. They are more, he said, they're gifts we give, we value them higher. Now, these were all 6-year-olds. The other 6-year-olds all broke into conversation saying, oh, you mean I've seen you eating dates? You know, there was a whole lot of conversation, and they're important, are they? And now, what actually happened there was they saw from his perspective a whole different view, a culture, a view of his culture and respect. You know, they're not going to knock the date out of his hand and throw it on the floor in the future because they've actually respected what he said about it. So that's culturally responsive. So you can actually come in on bringing the viewpoint of one child and share it with the rest and allow other people to see that perspective. And go back to that school in Rotorua, I was talking later to one of the kids out of that classroom, and I said to him, you worked really hard today on that, didn't you? I said, I could see you pushing everybody's thing. And he said, yeah, miss, and you know, that kid I was working with, usually I hate him. I said, well, didn't look like it today. He said, yeah, I know. But in maths, you can't hit anybody because you've got to work with them. You know, that's what you're doing. And like what we really want to do is to actually get teachers to realise that the lived reality of the everyday life of so many learners, and I've got Pacifica, but for so many learners, is actually different from the dominant. Our textbooks, our reading books, our everythings portray a different life than what these kids see for themselves. Yeah, and we've got to be thinking about that. And that's why I'm saying we've got to reinvent. Okay. So I'm just going really quickly through here. So I've just talked about that. I talk about this as a socially responsible approach, rather than, because from my research Pacifica colleagues, they say, oh, culturally responsive, Bobby, come on, that's a papa term. So I kind of think, yeah. But one of the things we always get, unfortunately, it's workload, we actually have everybody write their own problems, because how can you write, but you've always got the basis. How can you write problems, take things off the net and so on? Don't apply to your kids. And, I'll just go back to go back. We actually use this communication and participation framework. I know you can't see it, but I don't know if I sent it to somebody here, I'd be very happy for anybody to use it. It's actions teachers can take to set up a community of mathematical inquiry. So it's all the actions teachers can take to get this happening. These are the sorts of problems we use. You probably can't see this, but these are coming back to... Now, you might notice they're very wordy, right? Because actually our kids go up in reading as well. So sometimes they aren't wordy, sometimes they're just things, but mostly they aren't. And this here is just an example of another problem, but this is a comment a kid made. When the maths is about us and our culture, it makes me feel normal, and my culture is normal, right? Now, we've got lots of these types. This one was written for Ngāi Tahu. But in fact, when we actually use these types of problems, instead of the ones that come on gloss, or no, not gloss, but that come out of the others, we found that the kids' actual achievement was higher because they recognised these patterns. We took the patterns of the sasa, did a whole lot with 6-year-old children and 7-year-old children, did growing patterns with them using the patterns of the sasa and repeating, and the children could actually identify and grow those patterns at curriculum level 3. Whereas if you took red bead, green bead, blue bead block, couldn't do it. You know, so it's that kind of relevance. So, and one of the big things in Auckland and within all of the different Pacific nations is the ulele, you know, the lollilays that have come in, prize givings, everything. And they are great for proportional reasoning because every kid knows how to make them. They see the pattern. So, but this is what they're saying here. You know, it makes it easier for us to learn. Most of us have made it. We have a picture in our minds, and so we see how it's proportions and ratios. 1 chocolate, 3 fruit bursts. Oh, suddenly they're stage 8 on the framework. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. Those are just, actually that's one of the guys from up the coast. It's one of our teachers. Māori teachers make good teachers of Pacifica. Pacifica teachers make good teachers of Māori. Papaha teachers make good teachers of Pacifica. Teachers make good teachers of everybody when they fit with the children. And we work very hard on how you work together, and we use things like the te whawhai. That's it, my mum's te whawhai. My mum makes te whawhai. That's one of hers. But we use the concept that when that te whawhai is made, that it takes different people with different skills to put together the te whawhai. My mum is the one that does all the laying out, right? She's the one that does the design, the layout, right? And this was when it was being tacked. A group of women tack it, different people sit around and sew it. Who owns it? The family. And the cultural values, though, is a really great way of shaping pro-social skills, not anti-social. So questioning and challenging, systematically teaching the children how to question, how to challenge. We know that often a Pacifica child knows that somebody's got it or hasn't got all the information they need, but they won't ask them a question if they think they're going to lose face. You know, so you kind of have to step them through how you do that. Right? So it's just being in tune with their body language, right? But this is the sort of thing that children say. You know, we ask, do you ask questions? Do you challenge? And it was a girl said, I'd put my hand up and say, oh, I'm sorry, I disagree with your idea. And then she laughed and she said, only sometimes, because I don't want to hurt their feelings. So you kind of have to know this is what's happening with these kids. So respect is real important. When you have respect, you can have friendly arguments. We call it friendly arguments. Because the word argument is media non-friendly. And you argue about the maths, and we say you're not arguing with anybody, you're arguing about the maths. So it's not, nah, you're wrong or you're dumb. It's like, I don't agree with your maths, and this is what I think, or you have to convince me. It always makes me laugh because they shift into the politer, you know. And what do the teachers say? Because we work across schools, teachers are really, once they come to say this, they say they're really challenged. They thought they knew their children, and suddenly they realise they don't know their children. And the funny thing is that usually in schools, the teacher aides know the best about the background behind the children. So they're a great resource for writing problems and finding out what's going on. And of course, relationships. If those relationships in the classroom, it's not a safe classroom, it's not going to work. So, you know, this is again the same comment that threads constantly. It feels good that your teacher likes you, because sometimes teachers think that white people and Asian people will get the answer correct. But it's good that our teacher believes in all of us, like she believes in all of us in the same way. And yeah, it's really good. Isn't that an interesting perception of kids? It's there. Now this one was a really interesting, this was a Tongan girl who came through with this, but this is a thread I've heard before. What was it like last year when you were an ability group and this year you're not? What's different, what's the same? This girl says, at the start of the year, I would have said being a successful mathematician meant being in the top group and getting the answers right. Now I think it is being a good person. Not being the person who is always right, but helping others as well. That makes you good at maths. So she's got her identity as a cultural being. That's what it means to be a member of a family. And I just think that this here, if you know who you are, where you're from, then you'll know where you're going. Te taki māta. And I really do, give all credit to all the teachers that we work with who go on such a journey to get to this point where they can actually take this on. And that's why I say, because as I said, when I go into schools, they say, you've come in. And I've said, why do you do that to me all the time? And they say, because you have such high expectations. That's all I can do. Okay? Thank you.
Tēnā koe te māraikura, kua hau mai ki o whanaunga, ngā uri o Paikea e noho nei. Just reminding the uri of our ancestor Paikea who came from Mauke after a battle between his sibling Ruatapu. Made his way to the shores here at Whangara, and so here are your close cousins. Also reminding the whānau here about our connection to Tākitimu. Tākitimu landing just on the other side there, Toka Taio. And so in that, we are weaving the thread of purposeful connection. And I love the way you spoke about reinventing our approach. So thank you for reminding us of those connections. And I wanted to acknowledge several of the schools in Tūranga for already in a head start in some of this mahi working with Pacific Island children. Not as other tamariki, but as kids. They are ours. So we thank you for coming to us. I love your pearl on your necklace. In the Māori culture, if someone says something about you that they say it's pretty nice, you often gift it to them. Well, I had to try.